Namaste. Hare Om. Shalom Alaikum. Shalom. Greetings to everybody, all my friends, different parts of the world, wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in. I am Mathura Das, and I am doing this live share from, I said by mistake yesterday, Southwest London. It's actually Southwest England. I'm here in Southwest England. And so welcome to everybody around the world, whoever's going to see this. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be doing this. This is my 16th live share, and my shares comprise of a few chants of Oms, 3 Oms, some prayers to my gurus, my teachers, and then a chants and some songs, generally ones that have been written by me and Pranaji for our group, the Bindu Babas. And then I'm continuing my talk, and it's a long talk. And in the story so far, we've come up to me being in the Krishna Center in Amsterdam, and there's been a whole bunch of big changes, and it's 1976 in the story, and I'm going to carry on that later. So please, some Oms. Om Maganatimidandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swavadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatham Vritam Tam Sajevam Sadvaitam Savatutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Shiratha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shanyavadi Paskachade Shatarine. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Go Premanandi. Hari Om, everybody. Jai Sarvadaran Ajit. Hari Om Ajit. Hari Om, Hari Om. Lovely to be here, and so it's such a beautiful way to connect with people. Well, it has been for me, and I've been really enjoying because it is a kind of quite intimate thing. Really, I really feel like I'm kind of in some big virtual space, but it's really real, and we're all connecting together. So, and it seems to be. This portal has opened up in this unusual time that we're living in during the lockdown, and it's a kind of a very this has been here before, but it's becoming a precedent now. It's sharing in this way, and it's a great way to share because we are all isolated, even if there is no lockdown. So I'm really glad to be able to do that. So today, I think I'm going to sing a bit of Om Namo Narayanaya. And then I'm going to do Jar Love because the moon shines brightly tonight, and we've been having this fantastic moon, haven't we? So, oh, there's Jackie. Hi, Jackie. And so I'm just going to do a little instrumental thing, and then I'm going to go into Om Namo Narayanaya. It's considered a very powerful mantra, and it's the most popular mantra of the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya from South India, of the great Acharya Sri Ramanuja Acharya, who we celebrated his birthday a few weeks back. It was he made that kind of very popular, and so we're going to chant that afterwards and now, and a few variations to do with Narayana, Hari Om, Lakshmi, like that. Hari Om. Sorry, wrong key. Excuse me. There we go. It's the right one. Excuse me. It's call and response as well. Om Namo Narayanaya Bolo. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Lakshmi Narayana 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 Lakshmi Narayana 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 Narayanaya Om Narayanaya Hari Om 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 Shanti 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 Hari Om. Narayan, Narayan. Sorry, I had a little tickle in my throat then. Just have a sip. Have some lemon. Hope everyone's feeling okay today. Every day's a new day. I had a kind of couple of days off from live sharing and lots of communicating and talking and doing stuff on my new page, Between Worlds, and having a great talk. So one of the people that's right in the middle of my story that I'm telling, Hare Krishna, a very important person in my life during my time in Amsterdam. So I've been talking with him in Holland about the world and life and things like that. And it's great. Okay, so here we go. We're going to do Jaya Love. I love doing Jaya Love. You can join in. The chorus is Jaya Love, Rain Down on Me, and the other chorus is Drink Deep from the Chalice of Wisdom. Eat hearty the fruits of Jaya Love. And wrote this song in my late 40s, so it's never too late for anybody if somebody's thinking about writing songs or doing things. And wrote it together with Prana. And Jah, if anyone was wondering, is another name of God used by Rastafarians. Sorry. Okay. The moon shines brightly tonight, and the stars in the heavens immersed in light. We are connected to all. I dance to the rhythm of life, and I feel your love within my soul. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Your love rain down on me. Your love rain down on me. Sisters and brothers, please hear my song. Man have but a short time to live. Don't want to get it wrong. Reality is not what it seems, what it appears to be. Beyond the veil of illusion lies real identity. Oh, drink deep from the chalice of wisdom. Eat hearty the fruits of jala. Drink deep from the chalice of wisdom, wisdom. Eat hearty the fruits of jala, jala. With the final curtain, you'll come and take your bow. Leave the magic theater, the one you're in right now. Life come round full circle, you can come back again. Go through the same old story till you don't know when. Jah love, but when you're feeling Jah love, you fill your heart and soul. You no come back here no more, 'cause Jah Jah take you home. Jah love, rain down on me. Jah love, rain down on me. Drink deep from the chalice of wisdom. Eat hearty the fruits of Jah love. Drink deep from the chalice of wisdom. Eat hearty the fruits of Jah love, Jah love, Jah love. Ooh. Sisters and brothers, each one a star. Take hold of your courage, embrace your power. The prophets have spoken, the system will fall. Awaken your children, we herald the dawn. Jah love, rain down on me. Jah love, rain down on me. The moon shines brightly tonight, and the stars in the heavens immersed in light. We are connected to all. We are connected to all. We are connected to all, to all, to all, to all, to all. Jah love. And may his love, the love of the God and the goddesses, rain down on everybody, because we all need the blessings of the gods and of each other. It's quite hot today here in England, I have to say. Summer's building up. And I hope everyone's having a lovely time. I just was talking with our dear friend Katinka. It's getting quite hot in Varanasi, but they've got the Ganges, and it's not as hot as Vrindavan, which is really heating up. It's about 110, 104, 100, it's getting up there. And they're all in lockdown. Seeing some really nice reports about Krishna devotees in Bengal specifically. I've seen those because I'm in contact with my lovely friend who I know for years near my Sunda, and they're distributing grains to poor people and fresh vegetables. And but just heard that also some awful news. Some people from the villages got killed on a train track in India when they were sleeping. That was awful news. Anyway, send commiserations. What can you say to the family and everybody? And we have to, lots of horrible things happening in the world, but lots of beautiful things as well. And my share is a time really not to tune into all of those things, because we have them, it's there all the time and it's very apparent. This is an opportunity to kind of like focus and on something slightly different. And thank you all for tuning in. And my stories, it's been a bit of an epic story. It's come a long way. I don't know, for some people or other, this part of the story, it might be much more interesting than the rest, because lots of the story was historical and about this big picture that I'm a part of. And gradually through the story, it's all about these two historical processes, the Hare Krishna ripple and the psychedelic ripple that converged in the 70s, and specifically in my life in the late 70s. And that led to me leaving home in England and coming to Amsterdam, where I've been. And we're in this grand building on the Herengracht, but I'm not spending all of my time there. I've actually become a devotee that's traveling. And that was a big thing at that time in the Krishna movement. And that's how the expansion of it took off, was lots of young people like me in our late teens and early 20s with lots of enthusiasm and energy and devotion to the cause, went out to distribute literature, to spread the word, and these records that we'd started distributing, and this was to pay for the rents, for the pujas, for the feasts that we had, the printing of books. It was an enormous enterprise, and it was expanding all the time. The amount of devotees that were coming and joining the ashram, not like a phenomenal rate, because to be a Hare Krishna devotee, I mean, my goodness, the Brahmachari ashram where we slept was just a big room with a wooden floor. I mean, you just slept in your sleeping bags on the floor. That's basically what happened if you were a man. And then there was a girls' thing. There was no kind of special cushy thing with beds and mattresses and none of all that. And it was all kind of like, I mean, being in I don't know what it's like now, but at least in those days, it was almost like being a crack Marine in the Marines or something. Our lifestyle, especially our traveling lifestyle, I explained a bit in a previous share about how austere, taking cold baths outside in the winter in our traveling van sometimes, and sometimes staying in monasteries in Belgium. That was interesting to see how Catholic monks lived, and we were thinking, my goodness, they all have a cushy life, they all had their private cells. I think their first service in the morning was 6 o'clock. We got up at 4, and so on and so forth. They were a bit kind of mystified and quite impressed by our kind of lifestyle. And it was at that time, doing this service that I was doing, and what a lot of the young men were doing. And there was, I mentioned, Malati had come to Amsterdam, and she was with Gunamai and a couple of other women traveling. It was a very well, it was totally absorbing. For instance, you didn't have a moment off for any kind of relaxation or personal reflection. Was moments when you weren't engaged in some kind of service, and I have to admit, it wasn't all a bunch of roses for me. Sometimes I would get very disheartened, but like I mentioned before in the last share, we were collecting these funds, and I got better at it, and I kind of polished it down, and it was extraordinary, actually, the level of focus that we had on this specific activity. And One week, we suddenly got it. Our leader, I think it was Mahavidya, he'd been listening to some tape from America or something, and it was like one of these think and grow rich things. But it was, we were doing it for Krishna, it wasn't for ourselves. So the whole idea was that it was all in the mind, and if you could just think more, then you would do more. It was all kind of limited in our minds, and it was quite phenomenal. We all just kind of sit there and we just thought in our minds, I'm going to do more. We just kind of projected it, and we didn't really do any more specific effort than we did the days before, but somehow or other we managed to do this and collect more. But it was not what was really giving me spiritual juice. I was going to say this activity kept me off the streets, but it did exactly the opposite. I was on the streets, but somehow in this Hare Krishna bubble that I keep mentioning, even if I was going down a big high street in Antwerp or in some big city giving out records or books, and sometimes you had this experience, this phenomena that people called the flow. A lot of sports people and people involved with athletics and stuff, you go into this space and it's incredible. You would just kind of let go, and it would just happen. You weren't trying to do it, and you would kind of like float. I had that experience going on, especially on a Saturday, a big Saturday on Antwerp down the big high street, and I had bags of records, and I could see people in the crowd, and I would kind of float towards them, and it was sometimes it was all done hardly with any words, just a few gestures, and they would take a record and some books, and then you would walk away, and then you kind of maybe look back. They were standing there, and they didn't even really realize what had happened, because when you're kind of potentially we're all kind of yogis doing very strong sadhana and austerities and very focused minds, and that kind of so focused that it's a kind of mini type of siddhi that many people had developed, where you could kind of just say things and mesmerize people, and people would take money. So that was okay, but it wasn't really satisfying me. I was really wondering, some devotees really identified with this activity to the point where they saw it as a kind of like their career. And for me, it was just something I was doing at that time because it was the needed thing to do. And I was kind of okay. I wasn't even 20 yet, really. I was just coming up to 20 in this year, coming up to 76. And in 76, I mentioned before, people like me who was distributing, collecting money, we were kind of allowed to go on this pilgrimage festival that happens in India. It starts in Mayapur at the birthplace of Chaitanya for 2 weeks, and then moves on to Vrindavan. And Tulsidas had gone to the one of 74, then Mahavijaya, and I think Atmananda had gone to the last 75, and now there was a group of us that were going to go to the 76 festival, and I was so excited. It was incredibly big thing for me and everybody, but I couldn't wait. As I'd mentioned, I got deeper and deeper into the Indian the kind of indigenous roots, especially the Bengali roots of this tradition of what's called, the Krishna movement, but the philosophy and the culture is called Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which comes from Bengal, and it's got a very specific terrain. Not that it's all the same, but it's quite similar. It's flat generally. It's very lush. There's lots of rice paddy fields. There's coconut trees, banana trees, pan trees, betel nut trees, and it's very lush, and people live a lot in the indigenous way in bamboo and mud houses, like they do a lot all over the eastern part of India specifically. Well, actually, all over India, that's a very popular traditional way of living because it's cheap and very easy. It's all from the farmland, mud and straw and bamboo. And so I was very excited to go to this exotic world and experience it. After being a devotee and really working hard, like anything, it was a holiday, a spiritual vacation, you could say, even, and it involved us going up to Paris to meet a plane, a big 747 that had been brought from New York with lots of Krishna devotees on it, stopping at Paris, and quite a few centers from that part of France, Europe. We ran up to Paris and joined this flight, and it was incredible. There were so many devotees and people from America on the plane. The first time we'd met American devotees, and they even had buckets of prasadam, and there was a kirtan, and people were dancing, and the kind of stewards and stewardesses had to come and calm us down. And there's this lovely devotee called Bhagavat, who's now a sannyasi, Bhagavatacharya, and he was a very good talker and spent time in India, and he gave especially on the last part of as we were coming closer to India, he gave a talk about what it was, coming to the holy dhams and what getting us prepared in our minds. That was wonderful. But we stopped off in Bombay briefly because we were heading towards Calcutta, and that was my first sight of India, and I was really struck by the light and the lightness of everything felt light. That was my first feeling, and I was just amazed. And then we came to when we came to Calcutta off the plane. Calcutta was a very simple, small airport in those days, and dum-dum. Because Prabhupada's from Calcutta, he's a very respected person from Calcutta, and the mayor had organized a kind of reception party for us, and there was also a lot of devotees who from Iskcon. I remember Riksharaj being there, and they all looked really cool with their rock dye saffron clothes, and they were all really tanned and big chunky tulsi beads, and they were leading this big kirtan as we came down out of the plane, and we got garlands, and it was a fantastic, and it was it was February, it wasn't too hot yet, and then we kind of came through this area, got our luggage, we didn't have much, and we were going to go on these buses from there a few miles, hours away to Mayapur, Navadvip, the birthplace of Chaitanya. And the first sight, people often ask me, what was the first thing you really saw in India? Well, that was a reception party, but when we kind of just got to the door of the airport, it was very simple. Therefore, there was just a couple of taxis waiting, these yellow taxis that looked like ambassador cars, but they looked like the car that my father used to have, a Woolsey 444. And then just past that, there was a piece of grass with a puddle in it and a staff stuck in, and a bull tied to it. And crouching down by the puddle was a chap, very wiry, small Indian Bengali, with a small cloth called a gamcha around him, and with a lota in his hand, and he put it into the puddle and was just sitting there taking his bath right outside the international airport. That was the first thing I saw of India, and I just thought, wow, what a place. I just felt so relaxed. It was like, whew. 2 years of going on the streets and doing this and very focused and doing something that didn't die to do, and then suddenly coming into this atmosphere with it was an absorbing and feeling very at home in just this initial vibe, the relaxedness, the easiness with which this vibe was there, and looking out and seeing all the kind of coconut trees swaying in the balmy wind, and I went, yes, I'm gonna fit in right here. This is great. And then we jumped on those buses, and I remember Sudama was on our bus. Sudama, who was a Swami at that time, a very good actor, black devotee from America, and we drove through all the villages, and we arrived. It was great when you took a road after a while, going on this long bumpy road. You took a little road over a bridge, and there was a sign saying Iskcon that way. Kind of first time you realized it, and then you went down through these little villages, and it looked very, very primitive, very, very, very primitive. It was a bit like, oh goodness, didn't expect it to be that primitive. And then you came through the village, and then there was pointed out, this is the tomb from the Chandakazi, famous story, who was the Muslim in charge during the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's a great story I've mentioned in the share. Anyway, we passed his tomb, and then suddenly the Ganga. you see it coming on the right side, and then on the left side you come down and you start seeing these temples, different various temples from the Gaudiya Mutt. And then it said, and then you could see this white temple a little bit further to the left, and that was the actual birthplace called the Yogpit of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that was installed, that temple and that sacred place, by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in about 1880s, I think. Around that time, I couldn't find the exact time. Anyway, that was the seeing that, and then you came up, and then you came to Iskcon, the Chandradoya Mandir, Sri Chaitanya Chandradoya Mandir, and you came through the gates. And at that time, all it was a big wall. You went through the gate, and there were these buildings, little rooms on the edge on the other side of the wall, and this one building in the middle of the field that's called the Lotus Building now. And that was that was it. That was all the facilities. And we got off the buses, and there was all these, different people, and there was Bhavananda and Satadanya and the people calling out megaphones to people. And we all kind of just put in these rooms. And it was all very exciting. It was like going on a cub camp, really, but with the devotees being a bit older. And we had very basic facilities. And there were these, you went outside and there were these water pumps. You took all the water that had a bit of bamboo fencing around it, just a little bit of, from the outside, so not everybody was seeing what you were doing. And many of us didn't have things like gumshas and all of these different things like that. And lots of devotees, so the Americans, lots of American devotees that arrived, people were arriving from, that we were the kind of that contingent from Europe. And then in the evening, there was and Prabhupada was there up in the upper building, the upper rooms on the first floor. He had his rooms there, and the downstairs was the temple room of the deities of Sri Sri Radha Madhava. And many people from Europe, and my dear god brother Rancho, and I'm talking to him about his experiences, that during those kirtans, we were a little bit shocked, for us from Europe, a little bit by the kind of bawdy kind of nature of the many of the devotees from America were part of this kind of party that was called the Radha Damodar party, who I've mentioned, that was started by Vishnujnana Swami. But Tamal Krishna, who had been doing a lot of service in India, came back to America, and he'd been an old friend with Vishnujnana from years ago, from the Morning Star commune. They'd met there, and they'd joined, but very, very different types of personalities. But they joined together in this. Tamal had joined Vishnujana's party, and it had become. There was a lot of scandals in those days of the sannyasis going around to temples and trying to kind of, while these buses were traveling, they would sometimes stop at temples, spend a little bit of time there, and try and kind of steal the brahmachari devotees and say, come with us, this is the life, the lads out there, don't get stuck in the temple, that's for people who want to get married, this is where all the boys and the hang out. So there was a kind of, and a bit all over the world, you could say the traveling parties had a slightly kind of macho, laddish kind of atmosphere about it. And this became quite prevalent during the kirtan. It was like kind of almost going into a rugby scrum. It was pushing and shoving, and it was a bit, shocking. I actually had to stand back, and there were all these kind of these antics at that time. There was Guru Kripa, Madhuvisa, Sudama, these swamis that all had the kind of little gang of admirers and people. And they would do these during the height of the kirtan. When they built up, they would create this space away from the deities near the Vyasa Samba. Prabhupada wasn't there during the arti, but they would do these fancy dances and glide on the marble towards and we were all looking, going, oh my goodness, yes, right. I was really, I thought that was okay, but I wanted to go, where are the Bengali, the natives doing? I wanted to hear some kind of Indian style kirtan, and not this kind of big kind of macho American kind of thing, Anyway, that was the mood there, especially on that first night. It thinned out on a few nights, and a few other different people got to lead kirtans, and it wasn't all just about being in the temple room, because while we were there, part of the kind of pilgrimage is going on to around that area of where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born. He was born in Mayapur, which is part of what's called Navadweep, 9. That Nava means 9, the Dweeps, islands. They will consider all these different islands, even though they're not islands. They're of this holy Dham, really. And going through the middle of it is the Ganga, called the Suruduni Ganga. And they all have these different names. And across from Mayapur, the Ganga comes down from the north, and coming from the east, joining there's a Sangam, a confluence, and that's the Bhagirathi. The Jalangi River. It's a local kind of Bengali river, which is blue, and the Ganges is kind of silted, and it's incredible where they meet. And there's quite a big gap between the big town of Navadweep over there. The town of Navadweep's there's been a town there for hundreds of years, but the Ganga has changed its course, and the Navadweep we know is the kind of Navadweep that's kind of been there at least for about 200 years, at least in the way it is in the town. And and so basically on the Mayapur side there, there's a road called Bhaktisiddhanta Marg, named after Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, that goes all the way from the confluence all the way up past the Yog Pit of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to the different Gaudiya Math temples, and up to Chankazi's tomb. And then you've got this gut. And in those days when we went there was no motorboats or anything. And you actually had to get and the Ganga was quite a way away from the road at that time as well, in 76. You had to kind of walk away and get a boat. And it was all because the Ganges was flowing, and it was no engines. So it was all done by calculating the flow of the river. And it was quite exciting, but we didn't go over to Navadweep until a couple of days. But what we did was, on these parikramas, we would go on these buses, and sometimes we all had to go over the river and catch some buses on the other side, and then go off to these other places connected with Mahaprabhu's Leela. And during that time, there were some other devotees who would be doing kirtans and stuff like that, and that was really exciting. It was tons and tons of devotees. It was, and we were all quite young, and I think the Americans looked quite culture shocked by it all. It was quite a big, for some reason or other. I think it's a bit easier sometimes for Europeans to understand India, and what the first kind of real kind of experience I had was actually, I think, the next morning, after we arrived the next day. I went with this friend from Amsterdam who's a German called Bashakara, and we were just kind of dying to see what it was like to walk through the fields and go down to the Jalangi River. And so we walked through these fields on these little paths, and we got to another path that went parallel, and then we went down to the river, and it was so calm. It wasn't like the Ganges flowing. And so we had our little gumptious that we'd bought, these little cloths, and we just went, we hadn't done anything like this for, since being Krishna devotees, jumping into a river, and it was so cool, and then and floating in and seeing all the trees around and the green. It was ecstatic, absolutely ecstatic. We were in bliss. We were like little kids. And then we got changed again, and we thought, let's carry on down. And we'd only walked a little way, and then suddenly a voice said, Hari Bol, Prabhu, Hari Bol. And we looked over, and there was this very poor, humble kind of village man just who had a hut there, and he was inviting us to come to his house. And we just said okay, and we sat down. Then he did. Everything was just Hare Krishna, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. And there was no, because he didn't speak any English, we didn't speak Bengali, and he just kind of brought in front of us some puffed rice, and a little bit of gur, which is a condensed sugar that's made from the date trees there. And I think maybe a little bit of banana, and he just offered it on a little leaf plate. And they were just so pure and humble, and it was absolutely no other motive but to just kind of this kind of, you hear about Eastern hospitality. Here I just arrived, and I just kind of walked out of the big mainstream hubbub of all the foreign devotees and gone down, and I just experienced this really touching, simple thing. And we ate this, and and they were just so happy, and we were so happy that they were happy, and it was a kind of, they almost had tears in their eyes, and we had tears in our eyes, and it was very touching. and then what was interesting was kind of going down that road, and at the end of the road there used to be this big big banyan tree where all the rickshaws were parked just before getting the ferries down there and everything. And there was this deity of, I'd never first, I'd seen pictures of the devas, but not so much of Kali. I may have seen one or two, and I'm kind of used to look at it because quite fearsome, and I never could quite understand why people would want to worship that form of a goddess rather than Krishna or Radha. And so we came down there. Under the tree there was this form of Kali, and very ferocious, and there was all these things burning in front of her, and it just struck me, I just remember that was a vision that kind of struck me about kind of, I wonder why. It was only years and years and years and years later, after being in India and being in Bengal and meeting people who were very close to the goddess, that I got a little bit more of an understanding and a feeling, appreciation for the different forms of the goddess. So those are my, and then we went over to Navadweep. What happened was the food, the prasadam, and we were used to this fantastic prasadam in Amsterdam, and the prasadam that year was, I don't know, it wasn't that brilliant, and I was finding it really hard to enjoy it, and I was missing certain things really, and sweets, and it was very austere. The vegetables weren't brilliant, and they put lots of coriander and overcooked it. And then of course the inevitable happened. After a little bit I started to get, after only maybe a week or something of being there, I started to get a kind of a bit of a bad stomach and started to lose my appetite, and that wasn't enjoyable. And then we went over to Navadweep one day, and we just found out, really, I think it may have been that day that the great hero that I'd mentioned earlier in Iskcon, called Vishnujnana Swami, had just mysteriously disappeared. We were all looking forward to him coming, and he came, arrived from America, and he led the evening arti. He was really tall, and it was really kind of an energetic kirtan. And then the next morning there was a morning walk, and a conversation happened on the morning walk, and something was said. I'm not going to actually mention it now because it's all mentioned in books by Vyasaki, but it was a mystery, because Vishnujnana was this wonderful devotee that everybody knew about. People used to just kind of see him and want to become Krishna devotees, hear his kirtan, hear his talk. He was oozing spiritual potency and charisma, and he had disappeared. And nobody really knew where he was. And we were talking with there was a sweet shop near the center of Navadweep. There's this fantastic ancient banyan tree called Paramatala, means the great tree, and there used to be a sweet shop there, and we used to go there and you'd sneak over and find a couple of other brahmacharis who've been frustrated, and this really, it was all talks, you mustn't go and do this, it's not good to do, but we just kind of had to do it. We would have gone mad if we didn't have some of these sweets. Mishti dohi, sweet condensed yogurt, and some rushgulas, the cheesy sponge sweets, and we didn't eat much. Maybe we had even a samosa. Can't actually remember having samosa. I think we just had the sweets. And then we talked to one of these chaps from the Radha Damodar party who had just told us that it was all a bit, everyone was a bit freaked out by the fact of Vishnujnana's disappearance. And so that was a bit of a story. And then there was also, we had a bit of gossip there with this, kind of like, any more things that you know about? And somebody had said, I think it was there, that in that sweet shop, someone had said that they had heard that Prabhupada had mentioned that this year 76 was a kind of turning point in the kind of the good fortune of the Iskcon movement, that it had been riding on a crest of a wave, and now there was going to be some kind of like chinks and some things are going to start appearing in it. And it was a big testing time. It had reached a kind of a point in its development. And well, I don't know the exact words, but this was the kind of general feeling that we'd heard amongst the devotees talking. And it definitely, as things transpired that year and how things developed, it did seem that way, because as I've been explaining, I've just been focusing on my personal kind of journey and coming to Mayapur, but we're at this kind of like international festival with all these different devotees and the managers from all over the world, and you get to see it in one place, and it is really, really powerful. But then there's also this feeling about kind of where is it all going, and how is it going to go on like this, in this way? Because there were all sorts of kind of intrinsic problems that I wasn't totally aware of at this time, because I was kind of quite young and out of the way. But personality clashes with different devotees and different ways of doing things and management were becoming apparent. And the Prabhupada was still wanting to carry on and just kind of concentrate on finishing the Bhagavatam, because he knew, he was very aware of his mortality. And here we're talking about 1976. He's actually going to only live another two more years from this time, and it's going to be a whole new kind of story and chapter in the story of Iskcon these last kind of couple of years. And so that was one of the kind of rumors that were going around at that time. And so we had these lovely parikramas. I really enjoyed it, the experience, but I was kind of quite eager also to see Vrindavan. And so we left Mayapur, went to Delhi, and just at that time, in 76 February, there was a thing happening, political thing happening in India, where Indira Gandhi had called an emergency, where there's some kind of draconian, almost military take kind of running of the government. I didn't really know much about it because we weren't involved. We weren't following politics. But when we came out of Delhi and we're on the buses going towards Vrindavan, which is in the district of Mathura, which I've mentioned, and it's only a few hours, 3 to 4 hours away from Delhi. As we were coming out, there were these billboards, all hand painted in those days, and big kind of Stalin-esque type portraits of Indira Gandhi looking quite stern, and with a slogan saying, "Talk less, work more." And it was like, ooh, that's a bit kind of intense, a bit, I would only know a bit more in a year or so, when I kind of came back to India, what had gone on at that time. But then we came to Vrindavan, and when we came to Vrindavan, we did what a lot of devotees say they do on their first time to Vrindavan. There's a fantastic story in Krishna Leela of it's one of the most moving chapters, actually, and I've been rereading it with my friends Madan and Jagannath in our Hari Katha sessions, and it's always struck me how wonderful that whole chapter is, and how poignant, and how many beautiful descriptions are there. It's when Akrura, the uncle of Krishna and Balaram, comes from Mathura to take Krishna and Balaram from Vrindavan and take them to Mathura for their venture, to get their parents, Devaki and Vasudeva, who've been imprisoned by the evil King Kamsa, and to kill Kamsa. But when Akrura arrives in Vrindavan, and there's a whole wonderful description of all the thoughts that are going through his head before he gets there, and he's thinking about who I'm going to see Krishna and Balaram, and he's Bhagawan, he's the Supreme Lord, but he's appeared as this young boy, and he's thinking in this incredible way. And I don't know if somebody was reading the story on the bus. They could have been, but it was in our heads anyway. This whole story of coming to Vrindavan, and when we all got off the bus in Vrindavan, we all jumped on the ground, which is what Akrura did, and into the footprints of Krishna, and getting the dust of Vrindavan and putting it on our heads. And that was a great kind of, a very kind of typical kind of pilgrim type activity. It's the kind of things that one does when one is a pilgrim and goes to holy places. One goes down and puts dust on one's head from that place, because it's considered so sacred. Not just sacred because it's the place where Krishna has had his Leela and his devotees, It's because of all the great saints and all the great people and devotees and yogis and teachers who've come there and also put their special vibe there into the holy dhams. And we had these parikramas going to all the different places, a bit like in Navadvip, but this was all in the Braj area. And the most memorable were the ones led by Guru Das, who was a Swami at that time. He'd spent quite a long time in India and in Vrindavan and knew all the different places and was a very good storyteller and had a very nice, warm, kind of charming vibe. Except that during all the parikramas, I was having real problems, and it was quite embarrassing. I was having to kind of go. I won't even describe what I had to do, but there was local hogs involved in the story, and it was destroying. It wasn't destroying. It was disturbing my kind of total enjoyment of the whole kind of experience there. And at these experiences, even though we're getting to see Prabhupada, he's very kind of remote because he's always surrounded by elder devotees, and there's so many hundreds of devotees. So when there is a guru puja or something, there is Prabhupada on the Vyasasan, and there's a whole kind of groups of people around, and you're in this kind of group experience. It's not very kind of an intimate exchange with Prabhupada, even though it's an electric experience. And I have to say, when we went to Vrindavan, there was a change in the kind of the people who led the kirtan, and that's when we got to see Uttama Shloka and some other devotees from Canada who were doing. I'm trying to remember his name, but I can't remember his name at the moment. And then Lochanananda, who we'd been kind of keeping in the background, but we had our own kirtan group. Lochanananda was asked to lead the evening arati, and we were all there together, and it was good. It was a good, we did a good kirtan, and people liked it, and it was like showing everybody what we're from Holland, we do good kirtan as well, this is how we do it there. And that was a kind of nice experience. And I got a little bit of pocket money. I got made any time I ever got anything tailor-made was this. I'd always wanted one of these jackets, and they're very popular in Vrindavan and in Vaishnava, amongst Vaishnava pujaris, especially as a winter dress. They're made from cotton and they're padded. They kind of almost look a bit Tibetan. They cross over, and so you tie them here, and they were kind of with cotton and quilted basically, and I always wanted one. When I first time I saw one, even though I was a brahmachari living simple, I still had these desires for kind of looking cool and stuff. I'd also dyed all of my cloth when I arrived in Mayapur, everything in this rock dye, which has got this beautiful color. That's what all the members of the Gaudiya Mutt used to dye their cloth with. It doesn't look chemically and artificial. It's got this nice kind of tone to it, especially once you've done it and washed it a few times. And I'd also learned from Satvik Das, an Italian devotee who'd been there. I was actually there for his initiation in 76 in Mayapur. He had showed me how to tie this dhoti in this way, not the way with the flat front that all the Western devotees do, which is very impractical. This was a way where you did a kind of a curl at the front and tied it round. And I was into all these things, still am a bit, and having a really nice chadar and some very big chunky tulsi beads, like my hero Achyutananda Swami. He was a bit like my role model in terms of the look. And so I got this coat made in Vrindavan by Mr. Sharma, the tailor, who was there. He passed away many years ago at the end of Loy Bazaar. And it was it was great fun. Vimukta Sangha, my dear friend, he was there. He was having a good time. We were all living very, very simply at Vogel Ashram, and just sleeping on the floor, basically. And the prasadam was a bit better, but I couldn't eat much, So then, after the festival, we went back to Europe. We spent a kind of few days in Paris. New Mayapur, went to New Mayapur for the first time. I hadn't been there. And then we in France, which is the big chateau in the countryside, and I think it was Balaram's appearance day. We were there because we had all this honey, I remember. And then we came back to Amsterdam, and then it was it was like this beautiful, sunny, tropical weather we'd just been. It kind of didn't seem to. It seemed to kind of carry on. The spring was really, really lovely, and then it started to go into the summer of '76, and it was just going to get hotter and hotter. And now something happened a little bit at this time, which changed my kind of the course of where I was. Because I've been a bit weak, my energy levels weren't on fire, and we'd gone to the tropical museum in the tropical hospital in Amsterdam, and they diagnosed that we've got this kind of giardia, and we had to kind of have quite a strict diet. A couple of people had it. I don't think we took any medicine. I can't remember. It just kind of gradually went off. But after being in India and seeing the roots culture and kind of like stepping off this kind of really manic lifestyle of, passionate, continuous, relentless on the street selling, I needed something different. It wasn't, I needed a change, but I didn't know up until this moment, I'd never really asked any real specific favors or even had an argument or disagreed with any authority in Iskcon or my leaders. I've been quite an easygoing guy, really, and so very much respected Mahavidya, but quite intense at that time. We eventually I went down to Brussels. We had a little center in Brussels. It was just a house with a kind of a small little center because we spent a lot of time in Belgium. It saved money to have a little place there, so we didn't have to travel all the time backwards and forwards to Amsterdam. And we just kind of were setting up, and it was because I'd been the cook on the traveling parties. I went down into the kitchen to cook one day shortly after we'd come back, and Mahavidya came down. He said, "Where's the food? Prasad, why is it taking so long? We have to get out into the streets," and so and so. And he started laying this trip on me, and I just let him say it. And then I said, "You know what, Mahavidya? I've never said anything like this before. There's more to Vaishnavism than just rushing out on the streets at a certain time to do something. It's a culture that takes, meditation. It's got kind of subtleties involved, and I'm taking my time to do this, and I'm doing it in and I want to do it in a passionate mood." And he got really, and then he kind of, "You're just into sense gratification and all this kind of stuff." And I just said, "Okay. Just boil your own vegetables." I remember saying it, "Boil your own vegetables." And I stormed off. And he was a bit shocked, and I was a bit shocked that I'd done that. And I went off, and I had to sit for a while. I thought, "Oh my God, what have I just never done that before? I've never kind of confronted authority in the Krishna story anyway." But my whole life's going to be a series of these things. Anyway, so I thought about it, and then I just talked to Mahavidya, and I just went, "Look, I think Mahavidya, I think it's maybe better not for me to be on your party. It's going to maybe my presence might be a bit disruptive with all these new devotees and everything like that. And maybe it's better." And he was actually said, "Yes, I think so." And I said, "I think I might go back to the temple and help Lochanananda." And he said, and I there was a phone somehow or other. I'm not sure where the phone was, if we had one or landline, but I made a phone call to Lochanananda and told him kind of what had happened, and he was so happy for me to come back to Amsterdam. He really wanted me to come back there and help with the kirtans and all the things that because it was kind of there was lots of people joining at this time as well. And so but Mahavidya wouldn't give me the money to go on a bus or a train, so I had to just go out on the streets. And I remember just going out, boom, 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 sold a few records, got a book, got my money, and it was a far out feeling, actually, jumping on the train, going to Amsterdam. It was a whole new chapter in my life, in my Krishna conscious story, and I would never be ever again a full-time on the streets a Sankirtan a man, and that was the end of that chapter in my life. it had been very important for me, and it actually there's a certain kind of positive attributes to do with being disciplined, and I'm glad. I would never regret that I did all that. I did it, but I'm glad I personally, for me, I only did it for that amount of time. It was enough was enough, and then we came back to Amsterdam, and it was just this. Like I said, it was the summer. It was this famous summer of '76 that was just hot and hot, and so we came up with this plan, and Vimukta Sangha was there, and we were, now I was back in the temple. It was like kind of how to make the most of me, really, and so what we would do is we decided to carry on what Bhakti Jan and Dina Dayal had started the years before. They weren't there anymore, and we were just going to go to the big park in Vondel Park. There was one section where you could park your van down a road, come in this gate, and then there was this lovely area quite near where we could take pots without kind of carrying them too far. And Vasutama was there at that time as well, and he was a good harmonium player. He knew harmonium. I could play mridanga, and there was this Peter Das from Germany, and there was a small group. We had about 4 or 5, and Vimukta Sangha would drive the van, and sometimes he would just drop us off and go off and do something else, and then come back and pick us up later. And that's what we did nearly every day. And we had a beautiful picture of Radha and Krishna. We had some madrasa, some hangings, cotton hangings to put on the floor, printed from India, and it looked very nice. And I just remember that being one of the most kind of like beautiful. It was so a joy to just now be able to do kirtan, which is what I joined the Hare Krishna movement for, because of the Maha Mantra, and I could just kind of like do this. We could enjoy it and share it with other people, and we had developed a kind of proficiency. So the kirtan was a nice sound, and there was this. So many people in Vondel Park in that summer, people doing things and people just hanging out. And there was this black dude, really cool, who was kind of taught contemporary dancing, and he would just kind of go there and put some music on. People would play music and he would teach him, and they would all follow him. And when we would arrive, he liked us. He kind of came over with his group, and he just with his group did all this lovely dancing along to our kirtan. And one day, Lochanananda came because he didn't always have enough time, and it was I think it was a Saturday. It was a big day. There was just it was hiving with loads and loads of people because of the weather. People were coming from all over Europe. It was coming bigger and bigger and bigger. So many people, and we did this kirtan, and it was one of the best memorable kirtans I ever remember. And Lochanananda was really on form. And when he finished the kirtan, he gave this kind of really mesmerizing talk everybody was listening to. And he spontaneously just invited everybody that when we were going to leave, just to follow us, because we were going to have a big feast for everybody in the temple who could hear, And there was no feast. And I remember, I think maybe Vimukta Sangha had to rush back to the temple, or a phone call was made from the phone box just outside, say, we're all coming, cook a feast. And suddenly there was this kind of, back at the temple, they cooked this spontaneous feast. And when we left, we, like the Pied Piper, Lochanananda and us, we led this kind of big group of people all back to the centre in Amsterdam. It was quite a way away. And that was one of these lovely memories from that time. The next big thing that was going to happen was was Radha Gopinath. Basically, we were going to now have installed the deities of Radha and Gopinath, and Lalita and Vishaka, the 2 main principal gopis, were going to be installed in Amsterdam. And we had this incredible ceremony in Amsterdam, and Jayatirtha, who was in charge in England now, Hansaduta was away, Shamasundar wasn't in England, Jayatirtha had taken over, come from California. He was very good at puja. And he knew all how to do ceremonies, and he came over. And also in Bhaktivedanta Manor, they had a very good theatre group called the Bhaktivinota Players, and they did dramas and plays, and they came over to Amsterdam, and we had this fantastic ceremony festival, and it was one of the most, one of these days where the whole kind of temple really turned into the spiritual world. It was all decorated with garlands and colorful silk festoons and everywhere, and there was this big ceremony in the temple. There was quite a few Suriname Hindus. Mr. Dwarka was there. I remember he was a famous life member that came from Den Haag, and there was lots and lots and lots of guests, and so there was a whole kind of the day was packed with activities that were going to include ceremonies, feasts, and then a drama. And I actually it was a very famous story about Sakshi Gopal, the deity who gave witness. It's a story that's recounted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And I was quite thin in those days, and I'd come back from India at that time. It was the summer, and I was quite, and so I was selected to play Krishna, and it was wonderful. Paravida, he put all this blue makeup all over me and everything, and there was a crucial part in the play, and I was behind a curtain. And there's a bit where the curtain opens, and the character who's in the play talks to the deity, and the deity talks back. And we'd rehearse this, where there was sound effects, and there was a lot of people, over 100 people, all sitting up in the prasadam room above the temple room for the drama. And Mohan was there doing all the electrics and the sound and the lights. Bhumadev was there, Sakshi Gopal, Mamul Thakur, and maybe I can't remember who else is there. I will have to kind of remember later. And anyway, at the point where I had to pose there like that, and then that was my kind of where the curtains opened. I spoke to the character, and when I spoke, Mr. Dwarka went at the back of the room, went, wah, wah, wah. He actually didn't realize that I was it was me or a person. He thought it was actual kind of a Murti or something. And what I just still remember all these details. And as the play finished, and I kind of like, what I actually had to do was I had to walk through the crowds and kind of go up the stairs and up and walk really gracefully like Krishna. And they played that famous song, "I Am Missing You, Oh Krishna, Where Are You?" while that was happening. And so I walked up, and there was a few kids that followed me up the stairs. And when I got to the top, I just kind of, I was going to have a bath and wash it over. I looked in there and I went, and I blew them a kiss, and I went upstairs and had my bath. Anyway, that was a very, very special day, very, very special day. So now in Amsterdam, we had Radha Gopinath, Lalita Vishaka, Gaur Nitai, and Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. And wow, so the amount of devotees that were needed, I think around this time we had Jagadadija came from France. And I mean, one of his main services was just to cook. It took a long time just to cook what's called the Mongol Arti sweets. They're very famous all over Iskcon. The way that the deities are worshipped in Vaishnavism is that Krishna is worshipped like a kind of king and a person, and according to a system called these ashtakal, the 8 prahars through the day. And there's a very specific, this is all connected with the puja and the way that we worship Radha and Krishna in the temple, and the timings that we make offerings and what we offer, because it's related to what Radha and Krishna are doing at that time of the day in their Nitya Leela, in their eternal pastimes. So when at night time, when the deities are put to sleep, Krishna goes to sleep, their costumes and dresses are taken off, they're given a little wash, and they go to the curtains close, and the lights are turned off, and they go to bed. And then in the morning they are woken up, and it's all done with little bells and mantras and a very strict kind of procedure from a book called the Archa Padati. And mantras for purifying the hands, and it's called Archaman, and doing all these different things. And I've lost my point. Anyway, and so yes, so it's a very complex form of worship, the worship of Krishna. And like I mentioned before, I never really kind of got involved with that. But oh yes, and so when they are offered in the morning, the first thing that they eat are these Mongol Arti sweets, which are meant to be breakfast. because Krishna has Radha and Krishna have been sleeping, and they've waken up and they're woken with these beautiful sweets, and they are traditional sweets, mostly Bengali but North Indian, and there are nearly all, not all, but I think they were nearly all milk products, the Mongolatic sweets, as far as I remember. And there's various ones, and there's the Rashgulas, there's the Sandesh, there's the Rabri, and they're all various forms. Generally, there's a mass of milk. If you if you have a big wok and it's filled with fresh milk, and you heat it and evaporate it and boil it and boil it and boil it and boil it, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. One of the sweets that you can make what in this process is you take off the skin and put it on the side, and then you get this condensed milk, and you mix that thick skin, and that becomes, and when there's sugar, that's called rabri, which can be mixed with saffron and then pistachio nuts. It's absolutely divine if it's made properly. And if you just boil it down into this thick milk mass, it's called mawa. When you go through to India, or especially in Vrindavan, you see the sweet shops, you see these big round balls. It's generally mawa. And the other thing that they make is chena, or the same thing as paneer, but it's not squashed and pressed for frying in savory dishes. It's used in these sweet dishes called sandesh and rashgulas. And I love all these dishes, and my friend Darren and all of our friends, when we go to Calcutta, it's one of the great things we look forward to, is going to the brilliant sweet shops. And it's a big thing in Bengali culture as well. When you visit people, you bring these sweets. But anyway, these are the sweets that are offered in the morning to the deities, and then there's a breakfast, which is later, and then there's a lunch, and then there's afternoon, and there's evening, and it's quite extensive. How many vegetables they have to be, and there's a chutney, and there has to be chapatis, and I'd actually, my teacher specifically for these cooking the deity preparations was Vimukta Sangha. I learned quite a few big other subjects and things from Kishori and watching them in the feasts, but this, because it's very precise what you actually have to do. They had the timing. Prabhupada was very stringent, had a regime that he wanted. Timing was the most important thing with the offerings. Very, very important. And as I said, the highest levels and standard that Iskcon devotees have has been a lot to do with attracting the Hindus around the world that now generally kind of support and maintain most of the temples, which is going to be a bit of my story, because that is part of the story. It's like, okay, we are expanding the Krishna movement. We're getting more and more devotees, and we've got we've got a big building that we have to pay rent for. We have to pay for the food, and then we have to pay for the dresses. They're all kind of made in. Some of them were made in India, and then there were these ladies. That we had a whole room where the Ramadevi and Salendri and some other women were very, very talented. They were all kind of doing seamstress work and sewing, and it's very elaborate. It takes a lot of people. Now the question is, was this all going to be completely sustainable over the long stretch? Because even the activities like selling of literature and selling books and going on. I mean, I'd done it for 2 years and I was quite enthusiastic, but I couldn't personally take it more than about 2 years. And some devotees, I know, like Ranchal told me, said he could never really do it. Some devotees just weren't involved in this heavy book distribution, even though that was the very big. Iskcon was becoming obsessed with the focus of a book distribution, and what had come, it was slightly disturbing at this time, around this time, was they developed a very competitive spirit around the world between the different places about who could sell the most books. And then it wasn't even about the books, it was kind of like the money earned. And another name for wealth in India is the goddess Lakshmi. So in Iskcon, it's a term used for money. It's called Lakshmi. How much, So they had these kind of Lakshmi points. How many Lakshmi points? And I remember when it started, I was really going, what are these Lakshmi points? It wasn't very tasteful for me. I just thought that it was all a bunch of Americanisms that were just kind of sweeping into the kind of like the mindset. And I was just wondering, how long is this all going to be sustained? Because um, um, you have this quandary where, okay, the movement is expansive. It's about making new devotees, and you go to all this effort to make the devotees, and then when they come, you don't, you've got these activities that you got in the temple and all these different things to do, but then one of the primary things, and you can hear these stories endlessly amongst devotees who joined around this time, is they just kind of come, move in the temple, didn't even hardly know anything about Krishna consciousness. They may have not had this deep experiences and story like I had before becoming. They just kind of just got into it, and the next thing they know, they're expected to go out on the street and do this activity, because they didn't really know what to do with everybody. It was just like, this was the activity that pleased Prabhupada most, and and it brought in the money, so that was an obvious one that they liked. But there was certain kind of issues going to be connected with this activity and where this was all going. And I think that I am going to leave it at that point, because we've got to a whole kind of like chapter in the story about we've got to the installation of the deities in Amsterdam, and this activity that's happening that I've just described going around the world. Like I said, it's expanding, and also the fact that Prabhupada had also, there was this rumor in the back of my mind that I'd heard that after this year 76 things might potentially go a little bit wobbly. And so I'm going to carry on with that most probably tomorrow with my next talk. And so thank you so much for tuning in and following the story so far. This is a kind of, I don't think anyone's told this part of the history about what happened in Amsterdam, but anyway, this is what I was going through. And generally, at this period, being in the temple and doing lots and lots of kirtan with Lochanananda was in this beautiful summer in the temple, and then going out to the Vondel part was a very nice, wonderful time in my life. I really, really enjoyed it. And you think, well, yes, this is why I joined the Krishna movement. And I actually forgot to mention, when we went to the Vondel Park, I would cook halvah, and I experimented with all types of halvah. I even experimented with strawberry halvah, and we would make all these delectable, huge 40-50 liter pots of halvah, and we would just distribute them out in the park, and it was wonderful to see people happy. And he thought that's what a job of Christian devotee is: chant Hare Krishna, distribute prasada. That's what Prabhupada wanted to happen in Amsterdam, and we were doing it, and everything was lovely. Okay, I'm going to sing a song. I think last time I didn't sing a song. I think I'll just do The Only Way to Be again. But it's just the simple spiritual ballad, bring us all back to the moment. And this is the song me and Prana wrote about. It's like now I've just been sitting here yapping away for the last hour or so and doing this thing, and I totally forgot where I'm in another world. I'm not, even though I'm talking about the past, I'm not really there. I'm actually in the moment. I'm in the moment of talking about it. And so I'm here. And so it's a great feeling to be just in the now. It's a great feeling. You don't have any there's no responsibility for the future or lamenting for the past. It's all just happening now. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Oh, how we try to change the world around us, missing the boat while waiting for the tide. lost to ourselves in fear and desperation, dreaming of the future while trapped inside a mind. As out of a dream, my life unfolds before me, sure to reveal what's been there all the while. Struggled so long to untie these ropes that bind me in a body of pain. I remain frozen in time. The future and the past are not within our grasp. Somewhere between the two, you'll find the real you. And what you'll find is love that frees you from all pain. And with your inner light, your sight you will regain. There's nothing to compare to the joy of being there. This moment holds the key. We are eternity. Whoa, 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 da 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 do 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 do. The future and the past are not within our grasp. Somewhere between the two, you'll find the real you. And what you'll find is love that frees you from all pain. And with your inner light, your sight you will regain. There's nothing to compare to the joy of being there. This moment holds the key. We are eternity. Whoa. Hare. And thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. And it's great fun for me to share all these stories. It's the story's going to definitely pick up steam, and it's going somewhere. It's all going to. I'm heading back to India shortly, and we're going to be heading for a very, very big change in the chapter, with the passing of Srila Prabhupada, and that's most probably going to come tomorrow. So Hare Om, Hare Om, Hare Om. Look after yourselves, everybody. Keep in your spiritual power. Don't let fear, anxiety, and all the different contradictory and various things confuse you or and just bring you down. Okay? There's nothing to be gained from that.